Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome, everyone, to the Hooked on Movies podcast. Today, we will be looking at the 1972 political drama, The Candidate. With me are Ken.
What do we do now?
And Ted.
So vote once, vote twice, vote for Bill McKay, you middle-class honkies.
And I'm Eric. This thing you call politics. Politics is bullshit. Ted, give us the details of this movie.
The Candidate is directed by Michael Ritchie with a screenplay by Jeremy Larner. It has a running time of 109 minutes. It was released on June 29th, 1972, 4 years before my wife was born, to the day. A budget of $1.6 million, and it had a box office gross of $2.5 million. And we're going to do the cast a little bit different. There's the cast of actors, but then there's also a large cast of people playing themselves. So we'll start with the actors. We have Robert Redford starring as Bill McKay, Peter Boyle as Marvin Lucas, Melvin Douglas as former Governor John J. McKay, Don Porter as Senator Crocker Jarman, Alan Garfield as Howard Klein, Karen Carlson as Nancy McKay, Quinn Redeker as Rich Jenkin, Morgan Upton as Wally Henderson, Michael Lerner as Paul Corliss, Kenneth Tobey as Floyd J. Starkey. And in the people who star as themselves in this movie, we have George McGovern, the senator, Howard K. Smith, Hubert Humphrey, Van Amberg, Alan Cranston, John V. Tunney, Terry McGovern, Natalie Wood, Sam Yardy, Jesse M. Unruh, and Bill Stout. They all starred as themselves.
How about that Natalie Wood, who came out of retirement as a favor to Robert Redford? Looking good in that one.
Yes.
Do you know who made an uncredited appearance in his last film role in this movie?
Who's that?
No.
Groucho Marx.
Oh,
When?
yeah. Where was he?
I don't know. I've been looking for him, but he's credited to being in this movie.
I got it in the IMDb trivia section.
When did Groucho Marx die?
3 days before Elvis Presley. The only reason I know that is because the sheriff and the movie critic in The Devil's Rejects, the movie critic talks about that. He talks about how Elvis dying overshadowed the death of Groucho Marx. In The Devil's Rejects in The House of Thousand Corpses, the characters, the bad people, the family, are all based off of Groucho Marx characters. And it's the Firefly family.
I'll be honest. I know nothing about Groucho Marx.
So it's just a walk-on part.
So, Ted, tell us what the critics thought of this movie.
Rotten Tomatoes has this coming in with a critic score of 88%. It's not listed as certified fresh, but anything over, I think, a 70 is certified fresh. And it has an audience score of 74%. Finding critics from the time for quotes here was kind of difficult. There wasn't a whole lot to choose from. This wasn't widely reviewed in the papers. So we'll go with a negative first so we can end on a positive note. We have Dave Kerr from the Chicago Reader. I think we've mentioned him before. He said, much of it has a pleasing air of accuracy, but Redford's inability to suggest any irony about himself finally sinks it. It's the only sanctimonious satire you'll ever see. Andrew Saris from The Village Voice said, Redford fancies himself so superior to the electoral process that he ends up with a completely fatuous characterization of a politician. And then on the positive side, we had Vincent Canby from the New York Times, who we've definitely mentioned before. He said, it's one of the few good, truly funny American political comedies ever made. And the staff of Variety said, Redford's superior acting talents, which not often enough are tapped by the scripts he decides to do are nearly all on display herein in a virtuoso performance.
Well, hey, I've got another one for you from the back of the DVD from Jonathan Yardley of the Washington Post. He says, powerful, authentic stuff.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. One additional review. So, Ken, tell us the plot of this movie.
Marvin Lucas is a political election specialist who must find a Democratic candidate to oppose three-term California Senator Crocker Jarman. With no big-name Democrat eager to enter the unwinnable race, Lucas seeks out Bill McKay. Bill McKay is an idealistic, handsome, and charismatic individual. He's also the son of former California Governor John J. McKay. Lucas gives McKay a proposition. Since Jarman cannot lose and the race is already decided, McKay is free to campaign saying exactly what he wants to say. McKay accepts in order to have his chance to spread his values. With no serious Democratic opposition, McKay cruises to the nomination on his name alone. Lucas then has a distressing news. According to the latest election projections, McKay will be defeated by an overwhelming margin. Lucas says the party expected McKay to lose, but not to be humiliated. So he moderates his message to appeal to a broader range of voters. McKay campaigns across the state, his message growing more generic every day. This approach lifts him in the opinion polls, but he has a new problem. Because McKay's father has stayed out of the race, the media interprets his silence as an endorsement for Jarman. McKay grudgingly meets with his father and tells him the problem, and the other McKay starts showing his support. With McKay only 9 points down in the polls, Jarman proposes a debate. McKay agrees to give answers tailored by Lucas, but just as the debate is ending, McKay blurts out that the debate has not addressed the real issues such as poverty and race. Lucas is furious, as this will hurt his campaign. The media tries to confront McKay backstage, but his father arrives to congratulate him on the debate. Instead of reporting on McKay's outburst, the story becomes the reemergence of the former governor helping his son. The positive story, coupled with McKay's father's help on the trail, further closes the polling gap. With the election a few days away, Lucas and McKay's father set a meet and greet with a labor union representative to discuss another possible endorsement. During the meeting, the union representative tells McKay that he feels they can do a lot of good for each other if they work together. McKay tells him that he has nothing in common with him, but the tension is ended with uncomfortable yet unanimous laughter. After a publicized endorsement with the union rep and with the California workers now behind him, McKay pulls into a virtual tie and eventually wins the election. After winning the election, McKay pulls Lucas to the side and asks, "What do we do now?"
What do we do now?
What do we do now? I think the podcast is over.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, everybody. It was a great podcast. So, no, we're not going to let you off the hook that easy. We're going to talk about this one. So let's talk about the first time we saw this movie. I'll kick it off. Obviously, no surprise that I am a Robert Redford fan. This is one that I saw in high school on DVD. In high school, I was a little bit of a political nut. Surprise, surprise. So I've seen a lot of political movies we have talked about and many we have not talked about. I saw this one on DVD. Probably purchased a copy of it sometime in the late 90s. It was probably one of the first DVDs I had ever purchased, at least one of the first 10. If that gives you any hint about the movie, but that is my first viewing of it. How about you, Ken?
I got your DVD copy in my house right now.
You do have my DVD copy, so what does that tell you?
That tells everyone here that I just watched it for the first time this past week.
Hopefully, Ken is not using it as a coaster as we speak.
No, I'm not using it as a coaster. No.
Yes.
Mini Frisbee maybe, but not
Mini
a coaster.
Frisbee, sure.
I wasn't even aware of this movie until this podcast, and we started doing some Robert Redford movies and did some research on all the stuff that Robert Redford has done in his life, which is a ton of stuff. I didn't realize how many movies. I knew he did a lot of movies, but I didn't know it was to this extent. So the first time I was made aware of even The Candidate was over the last year and a half, going over some of the Robert Redford movies.
Cool. And how about you, Ted?
This week was the first time that I've seen the movie.
2 newbies. How about it?
Yeah, 2 newbies. Like Ken, I thought I had a pretty good handle on the breadth of work that Robert Redford did. This one slipped by. I, along with Ken, did not realize just how prolific Redford was. which is a good thing because he's a hell of an actor. Whether you like it or you end up not liking it one way or the other, but it's always fun to come to a movie that you haven't seen. I mean, when you've seen as many movies as the three of us have seen, it's hard to come and find a movie that at least, well, because Eric, you're the one who has seen it. So finding a movie that all three of us haven't seen is going to be tough. But for myself, I always find it fun to come to a movie that I've never seen before.
It's pretty hard for me to find a Robert Redford movie that I have not seen. I think I've seen probably every one he's done. I at least know I've seen most of the stuff he's directed as well. I'm a fan. We could say that.
I was almost thinking about renaming the podcast after Robert Redford.
Hooked on Robert Redford, yeah.
Based on how many movies we've done of Robert Redford already in a short period of time.
It's probably like a third, right? He's in a third of the movies we've reviewed.
Hooked on Jeremiah Johnson.
Hooked on Jeremiah Johnson. That's right. Next week, Electric Horseman. Just kidding. Maybe down the road. If anyone even knows that movie. Do you guys know that movie? No.
Yes,
there you go.
I am aware of that one.
All right, there we go. We got someone who's aware of it. That's a win in my books.
I know the Sting.
Yeah. Well, you better know the Sting. If you don't know the Sting, you're out. You're done. We will replace you with a monkey.
So we're upgrading?
We're upgrading to a monkey. That's right. A chimp. Yes.
Major ouch, baby.
Yeah. Major ouch. So, no, we would never replace Ted with anything.
Maybe.
Especially a monkey or a chimp.
So cross the chimp's name off of the board?
Cross the chimp's name off of the board is a weekly replacement for Ted, yes.
Got it.
Let's kick it off. We'll talk about The Candidate here. It's a movie that came out in 1972. This is one that Robert Redford had a lot of influence on. Shocking, surprising there. Mm-hmm. He wanted this thing filmed, wrapped up, and released before the election in 1972. That was one of his big hot buttons, and he was able to get that out. We all know that Robert Redford is a little bit of a political man. He definitely has his politics. I'd say probably a little bit more on the liberal side, not to the extreme. More of a liberal than a conservative, and which is kind of ironic because this movie, when you're thinking California and you're thinking California in the 1970s or California today, having a three-term Republican senator doesn't seem like anything that you would see in California, being such a heavily Democratic state that it is.
Well, I did a little bit of research on that. I knew that there was a time in California's history for a long period of time.
Oh, same for their governors, too, with Reagan as governor.
Yep, they were a staunchly Republican state. When I was researching the political history of California, it was after this 1972 election, so it was after Reagan then ran for president. They were still staunchly in the Republican side. They started to become what we would today consider a battleground state around 1988. The shift finally happened in 92 with Bill Clinton's election. And ever since Bill Clinton's election, they've really turned the corner toward a more liberal-centric politically. But as with any state that has a major metropolitan area, which California has about 3, those 3 areas really dictate the whole state's political climate, but there are still parts of California that are still staunchly Republican, maybe not quite as staunchly Republican as, say, Southern Illinois is.
Oh, there are. Orange County is 99% Republican. Northern California, above Sacramento, in the rural areas is a heavy Republican stronghold. But like you said, you have San Francisco, you have Los Angeles, you have Sacramento, you got San Diego, heavily Democratic areas that pretty much carry the state. But this movie coming out in 1972, you made some very good points there regarding the switch of the political climate. The character that Robert Redford played was based on a U.S. state representative and then a U.S. senator by the name of John Tunney, an interesting character in himself, which Bill McKay is based on. What were your thoughts of Robert Redford's portrayal as a political candidate? Like, an actual candidate running for political office. Was it believable? Did it seem far-fetched, Hollywood-esque? What were your thoughts of it?
I thought he pulled it off. I buy him as a politician. He did lack charisma, in my opinion, for a better part of the film. But I think that's probably somebody who's a fish out of water that's being thrown into politics, because that's not what naturally his character is supposed to be. He's a lawyer, a good doer lawyer who
He's a civil libertarian lawyer. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But he just seemed kind of dull, not interesting. Some of the things he was saying was interesting, but the vibe I was getting off of him wasn't that of somebody that I could attach to. So in that aspect, he doesn't do well as a politician, but I enjoy the ride of him having to adapt to being a politician throughout the movie. And actually, the second half of the movie, when he is tired and he's going through the motions of it, I think is when he's doing some of his best acting as a politician or somebody who's had to sell his soul to the devil to become senator.
It's a clear evolution of a man who is asked to run for political office. And we're not talking just a local school board seat. We're talking a U.S. senator. That's big stuff. And to be asked to run for that office, knowing that you're not going to win, you're literally just running because the political machine needs to get their money and have a candidate in there. And they think he's a great face. He's the son of the former governor of the state of California. His charisma, like you said, Ken, is very low. He's very sarcastic in his answers. And you can see throughout this film the evolution of the candidate, if you will, turning from a naive person who really doesn't understand how the political machine works to someone who is now thrown into the machine and is kind of evolving into an actual candidate, going through those candidate norms of, doing all the dinners, the luncheons, the speeches that are all the same thing said at every speech. Initially, he would just shoot from the hip, hip from the shooter, so that I can't remember.
Well, he was allowed to shoot from the hip. He had his own notes, and his campaign manager was like, you got your own notes? Go for it. They were fine with that at the beginning. Because your question was, what do we think about him as a politician? And I buy him overall as a politician, but as a likable person, he's not very likable. And he's supposed to be this guy who is fighting for the little guy. Even in his relationship with his wife, at no time do I believe that they're even married.
They definitely had some marital issues. She is thrilled to be a senator's wife.
Oh, yeah.
Doing all the magazine stories and the pictures and all that stuff. She would love it. And of course, we can debate this. He does what a lot of politicians do. They cheat on the old spouse, right?
Yes.
That's a popular one. And, we can talk about that. He's leaving the hotel room. He's late to meet the head of the local union. Some sarcastic comments are said between his father and the head of the union while they're waiting for him to show up.
Oh, even the staff knows. Even the staff are joking, oh, we saw him in the hotel already. But the way they're saying it is we know that he's in the hotel and what he's doing in the hotel.
So you think he's having an affair?
I'm definitely thinking he's having an affair there, yes.
Ted?
The first time I watched the movie through, I never made that connection. And
really?
Then I talked to Ken. We were just shooting the bull about just little things about the movie that we caught. And when he brought that up, I had never really even came to my mind. I mean, his dad made a comment, but I hate his dad so much that I thought that he was just being an asshole. And
his
so
dad is an asshole.
Oh, his dad's a piece of shit. And so I never really gave that any thought. And when Ken mentioned that, I told Ken, I'm like, well, I'll look for it. And I guess the more you look for it, there are a couple of things. Don't forget the first time that he meets the lady that he's supposedly having an affair with, they're at that gala event and she palm hands him a note.
Yeah.
We never see what comes of that note or anything other than the fact that she comes and she's whispering in his ear a couple of times. I don't think she speaks at all during the course of the movie.
I think she says a couple lines when he first introduces, like when they're standing in line, the wife and him. But you're right. Ken and I had the same chat. I was kind of like, well, I don't think she's having an affair. But then I went back and I watched those scenes. I'm kind of changing my tune. I think you're right, Ken. I think with the marital issues and the way it's all playing out,
I do understand what you're saying as far as the marital issues, but I don't know if it's poor writing or poor execution. It never seems like it goes full one way or the other.
I think that's on purpose.
Yeah, there's
I
the
really
part
do.
where he comes home and she's dressed in her riding outfit,
Right, that
horse
she hasn't
riding
worn in
outfit.
years, right?
I think she's trying to do what's best for him. I think she's supportive of him at the beginning. Like she said, if he puts his mind to it, he'll do good. I think you are right. I think she wishes that they were going to rise above their current status.
Oh, she was
their
clearly
current
wrapped up in
state.
that. Come on, a senator's
But
wife?
here's the other thing. This goes back to your original question, and I'll answer your original question, which is, do I believe him as a politician? I believe him as a good man. This is a term that's been around since around the mid-90s, and it's called a limousine liberal. He's not technically a limousine liberal. He's got his foot in both sides. Meaning he does do the work for the civil liberties and he helps the poor people. He does pro bono work. So he does all of that. But he's also very privileged because their house.
He's got a lot of money behind him, obviously.
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, she does not work. She's a photographer,
Right.
an artist, essentially.
And they have a very nice
So-
home.
And then we see what his dad's estate is like. His dad has a place where he can go hunting in his backyard. He is very privileged, so that leads me to believe that he's more of a limousine liberal. While he holds conviction for his beliefs, I think he does honestly believe a lot of it. I guess that's what they're going for on satire. That he is a rich person playing the part of I guess what a derogatory term would be a bleeding heart liberal. Peter Boyle is probably the only honest person in the entire movie.
I don't know. The guy
Because
who's
I
running
think-
the video and the commercials is pretty honest. What is he eating, like walnuts all the time?
No,
Crushed
he's
walnuts?
eating. He's taking
Popsicles.
pop,
or
not
not
popsicles,
popsicles.
lollipops.
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 Oh,
And he's
is he?
crushing
I
them.
did not catch that. Is that what he's
Yeah.
doing? Oh,
He's crushing people's childhood if you really want to make that
Wow.
that connection.
that's good. I like
I mean,
that.
this
Yeah.
this person, he is an interesting character, but as far as being an actual likable person, he's not likable.
Oh, he's
All
sleazy. But if you need an ad man, if you need someone to put your image on television, that's the kind of person
Right.
you want behind
You
you.
know what?
It-
I don't know if he's that sleazy. I actually think he actually likes the candidate. I really think he actually likes
No, he
Robert
doesn't.
Redford's character. He's interested in it, but it's his job to make him win.
He's a, what do you call it, a mercenary for hire, if you will.
Right. The reason that I say he doesn't believe in him when McKay wins the election is at the end of the debate. And when he's actually honest, the guy you're speaking of is going to go in and
He's
tear.
going to go ape shit on him.
Exactly.
And Boyle's like,
He-
no, let it go. Let it go.
Right.
Yeah.
Because Peter Boyle knows exactly how that's going to play. And the guy who's the ad guy doesn't know how that's going to play. And so he doesn't believe in him. He's in this for one reason. He wants to get his name out there so he can run.
Sure.
He can.
That's
so
what,
he can
that's what
run
they're all
a
doing.
big
It's to get
But
their
that
name.
doesn't make him
campaign.
sleazily. I mean, they had a
He's kinda
plan.
dirty.
They
He's
had a
kinda
plan, and
dirty.
McKay decided to screw them over on his.
Think
I
about
guess
how
sleazy maybe not be the right word.
Okay, but think about how he
doesn't
talks to
have
his
any
staff.
moral.
You know, he's like, hey, honey, sleazy is a good word.
He's morally fungible.
He's like a used car dealer.
I
He
agree
is.
with that.
I mean, you just talked about Peter Boyle's character. He flip flops too. As soon as they get closer and gets closer
that's
and
what
closer.
he's-
Sure, absolutely.
But that's how he's supposed to be.
But you're giving the ad guy the same problem though, and he's supposed to be that too.
The character is played very well.
Incredibly
And the
well.
character is written very well. It's an honest portrayal of that type of person.
Who really changes McKay? It's Marvin
Who
Lucas.
changes McKay? Well, McKay changes
changes
McKay
McKay.
because he doesn't want to get humiliated.
That's because Peter Boyle's character basically says, you're going to get
You lose.
humiliated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, well, I thought this was the whole point. It was to lose and for me to get what I want to say out. And Boyle is the one that changes his mind and manipulates him into the candidate that we see at the end
Okay,
of the movie.
well, then you saw the pivotal scene a little bit differently than I did. The scene that we're talking about is when, after he's won the nomination, which there was nobody else for the nomination,
Correct.
this was a lost seat. Peter Boyle takes him aside. I believe they go into a lavatory.
Because they keep on knocking on
And
the door.
Keep on knocking on the
Right,
door,
right.
yeah.
Peter Boyle's character tells him that he's going to only get 32% of the vote. I took it, when the camera shifts over to Robert Redford, I thought the look on his face was one of ego. and hurt ego. And he realizes that he doesn't want to be humiliated. I think, honestly, at that moment in time, I think he feels that if he gets humiliated, his message will get humiliated. And he doesn't want that to happen. And so
True.
that at that point, he's willing to do what's necessary, and he bends his...
He plays the political game. He's playing
and
ball.
he starts to play the game. And I think Peter Boyle's character is, like I said, why he's honest, is he's giving him an honest assessment that you're going to get humiliated. Now, does Peter Boyle know that this is going to play into his ego? I think Peter Boyle knows that. They went to school together, so he knows him already. And he knows that he comes from a political family. So he knows that there's going to be an ego there, and that he's not going to want to get humiliated. And I think that's why he chooses the language he does.
You were talking about pivotal scene. That's not the only pivotal scene. In fact, I think the more pivotal scene, you had that news coverage that basically said that he was fresh air, to politics, but then lately he's become the same old politicians that they deal with all the time. And McKay takes offense to that and challenges Boyle. They go up there and they talk about it, and he's like, I'm supposed to lose. I want to get what I want to say out. And at this time, Boyle does no longer want his message to get out. It's all going to be written for him. He's going to go into this debate because he realizes when they're 8 points down and the opposition wants to do the debate,
they got a shot.
And this is where I think it changes. Boyle does manipulate him. He manipulates him to run, first of all. And then he manipulates him to do better when he's going to be humiliated. When he gets within 8 points, he manipulates him again to do what they say. From there on, his speeches all sound the same. He goes off script there at the debate at the end, but after that, he doesn't change. And in fact, it drives McKay crazy. At the end of the film, he's doing things like blah blah blah, and saying the white honkies
in
and
the
stuff
limo,
like that. He's losing it, and he's laughing. He's laughing when he's trying to do that promo that he's doing for one of the local news outlets, and he can't keep it straight because he's so tired because he's saying the same thing over and over again. I think Peter Boyle's character, of all the characters, he's the scum. He's the manipulator, not his dad. His dad actually stays out of it. His dad actually listens to
until
McKay.
they bring him in.
It's Redford, the younger McKay, that goes to his dad and basically asks him for help. Why?
Right.
Because he's manipulated to talk to his dad.
Right.
He doesn't want his dad to be part of it. He gets his dad in, and I don't actually think his dad acts like a scumbag at all throughout this whole thing. I mean, we can question what he says a little bit about his wife when his wife walks in, but when does he really ever do anything scummy?
He's a politician at heart.
He's a politician. Yeah,
and obviously he is a former beloved governor because his endorsement helps out his son. One of the characters I want to talk about who I think is so great is Crocker Jarman, who every time he sees Bill McKay is literally patting him on the head like a child. Doesn't even take him seriously every time he talks to him.
Does he say, how's the pitching arm or something like that?
Something like that. Yeah. How's the pitching arm? Or he's like, I'd like to debate you. And he's like, oh, I'm sure you would. He doesn't take him seriously until the end where he wants to really put on the debate and he realizes that this is a serious candidate. But Crocker Jarman's character is like the perfect stereotypical politician. He's there at the fire, in Malibu, comes in the helicopter, all his contacts in Congress and in Washington, he puts the Jarman Watershed Act. He is the stereotypical politician, and I love him in this movie.
Ted was telling me about Jimmy Stewart was offered the role initially, but he turned it down because...
Oh, you would have loved that, Ken.
Oh, I would have loved it because Jimmy Stewart is my favorite. But the thing here... But Jimmy Stewart thought it would make conservatives look bad. But I think if you would have gotten Jimmy Stewart to play this part, it would have humanized him a little bit more than the actor that plays him.
Are you talking Crocker Jarman?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, I was going to say Jimmy Stewart age-wise would be perfect for Crocker Jarman.
At that particular time.
Yeah.
And I think he would have given him a little bit more of a human quality because he is very stale. I buy him as a politician too still, but at the same time,
But
it's painted as one
Here's the
direction.
problem. I'm going to say it. It's the white elephant in the room. I'm going to say it. And I know Ken is going to hate me for this, but I'm going to say it. Unfortunately, when you put Jimmy Stewart in any role, all I hear is "Gee, Mr. Potter." Whatever he is doing, all I hear is "It's a Wonderful Life." It's like Stifler. I always hear the Stifler line. I love Jimmy Stewart. I think he's a great actor. All I hear is "Gee, Mr. Potter" and everything he does. And I think if you put him in this movie, I think all people are going to say is, "Wow, it's Jimmy Stewart."
I think it kind of betrays this character. He's like an eel. He's slimy. He's slippery.
He's an old school
like
politician, man.
He's an old school politician. But you want to know something, and it's something that I caught the second time that I watched this movie. The speech that he gives right before the election is decided, where it's his face behind him giving that speech, that is so reminiscent of 1984 and Big Brother looking over
the movie 84 or
the book and the movie 1984
Okay.
by George Orwell. He is the machine. And see, and this goes into the whole thing, if whether or not this is really satire. They're poking the machine, and Crocker Jarman is the machine. Everything that goes wrong is never his fault, even though that he's on the committee. It's the same thing that has prevented us from being able to solve any of our major problems in this country. He is a microcosm for everything that's wrong with our political system. He has no accountability, and he has an excuse for everything, and he's just a bad guy. Like I said, that last scene of that picture behind him, his eyes looking over the top of him giving that speech, and the speech itself, if you actually listen to it, it's kind of scary. There's some real troubling things that he comes out and says there. It shook me. I wasn't expecting that because I didn't watch it the first time. I didn't see it that way. But the second time when I watched it a little bit more closely, I was kind of shocked. But
I think that's what
He's
Redford was
horrible.
trying to go for as well.
But who isn't to say that Bill McKay doesn't turn out to that? Who isn't to say that 12 years ago, Jarman was an idealist, somebody who wanted to do things his way, but the political machine got a hold of him and changed everything. We see this thing that happened to McKay. He has great intentions to start this all off, and by the time he gets elected, the only thing that we're left with at the end of the movie is, what do we do now?
His whole candidacy was turned into a catchphrase. There has
Right.
to be a better way. Bill McKay. That's how they ended every speech.
Let's make America great again. It's always about catchphrases, and and maybe McKay turns out to be a really good guy, and maybe he does make changes. But we've seen politicians, and I'm not going to go into much politics because that's not what this podcast is about. But I've been invested in a politician in the past where he stood for something, and then the political machine got a hold of him, and then it changed almost everything about him, and it basically changed my opinion about him because he started to act like what he was against.
I think that's part of growing up in America. I had a similar experience where
I think we all have.
I was bought into a political candidate, and while he ended up being a decent president, he never lived up to the expectations that I had and disappointed me on quite a many things. Ken, don't confuse McKay from Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Well, I'm not
they're
confused.
because-
I'm
no,
watching
they're
this movie.
two different.
Ken was kind of making that comparison, or
Were you, Ken?
inadvertently, that he
I didn't see that.
he said that McKay was maybe a good person.
Sure.
that may get polluted by the system, and Crocker
He was in the
Jarman may have
process.
been a
I
good
mean,
person.
McKay was going down that road, clearly.
The way that I would see this, I don't see it that way. When I used the term limousine liberal for McKay, he has the right ideals, but he's also morally able to be bended. He's able to be bent to the will of the machine. So he figures it out time and time again. His ultimate victory for his quote-unquote message, which is the end of that debate, is used to win him the election, even though the message is then lost anyway. Bill McKay is not the type of person like Mr. Smith who would die on the hill of what's right. He's not going to be that type of person, and I don't think he's got that in him. And then here again, we go
Smith
back.
was a naive character.
He's a true idealist.
Right.
Okay, but
right.
there's a big difference between, let's say, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and the candidate. Mr. Smith, he didn't have to campaign for his job. He was brought in as a automatic replacement.
He was appointed.
I felt that comparison was there because
I
I don't
see that
think
comparison.
that And this is the thing, and even Ken, you had mentioned this in your plot. I never got the impression, maybe I'm mistaken, I don't think Robert Redford's character is naive or ignorant or idealistic at all. He might say he's shocked by the game that's being played. I don't see how he can be. His dad was a governor. So when you went back to your original question, Eric, about whether or not he's a believable, Robert Redford is believable as a political candidate. Bill McKay, I find inconsistent because he shouldn't be ignorant or idealistic of what it's going to take to get elected because he had to see what his dad went through to get elected. And his dad can pontificate all he wants about how he ran his campaign and blah, blah, blah on all his puffy-chested bullshit.
Yeah, we know
that's
not
all
the
it
case.
is
Right.
bullshit. That's why I can't stand his dad. His dad is one of the cringiest characters we've encountered in a while, and considering we dealt with JFK 2 episodes ago, that's saying a lot.
I don't see anything that his dad does, except maybe a little bit pompous, because he is pompous. Let's say
You
that.
have to be pompous to be a governor.
It's the way he treats people that just, it really was shocking. I don't get offended.
I only see him really treating his
just
son. I don't see him interacting
son,
with anybody else but his son.
He's dismissive of everybody. The way he talks to Bill's wife, Harvey
one
Weinstein.
line.
It's of the
It's
era.
of the era. That's what I was going to say.
Totally
too, yeah.
of the era.
But he's actually there for his son. And like I said earlier, he stays away from the election. He's not trying to get his greedy hands on the election. He's pulled into this election because why isn't your dad with you? Why don't we hear any support from him? Well, it's because
he wants Bill to come beg him.
I think he has ulterior motives. He gets off on it. His son begging him for the power. It's like Kiss the Ring. Total Godfather
get back
moment
in the limelight again, and I get that. But up until he goes into the house, what indication do we get that his father is manipulating the whole situation for him to come see him?
He's not manipulating the whole situation. But he knows by not making any statements to the press, he knows that he's going to force his son to have to come to him.
Asked him to do that.
He had no
even
choice.
Asked him, he told everybody that he doesn't want his dad being a part of this.
Right. The rumors are, well, your dad is supporting Crocker Jarman.
Who set that up? Bill McKay sets that up on his own. Not his dad, but himself. He shoots himself in the foot by alienating his dad, trying to distance his dad. I'm sure his dad was probably a Democrat or a liberal as well, but maybe he wasn't.
I don't think so at all.
Maybe
conservative. I think he's Republican conservative.
That's why he's really distancing him from.
Because think about it. Think about it. If you've got the old guard, who's Crocker Jarman, who's your 3-term Republican U.S. senator, you have a former Republican governor, you have a son who, like you said, is a limousine liberal who maybe is going a little bit against his father's old core beliefs, because there's no way his father would do anything that his son was doing, helping those people. He could give a shit about migrant workers in the fields. So I think by getting his endorsement, you're getting those independents, you're getting those Republicans that are on the fence. They're like, well, I could use some change. And, he is the son of the former governor who we did like. Let's give him a shot.
At any time during the movie, did they mention that his dad, what political party he was with?
I did not. I did not hear that.
Well, the governors of that time in California were Republicans.
Right.
So were the senators and representatives were overwhelmingly Republicans. So, I mean, this is, like I said, this is the state that sent Reagan to the presidency. His dad is a Reagan-type Republican. I mean, you could see his dad having the anti-communist speech of the 1950s running for governor of California.
Yeah, but we don't seem to know how long ago he was governor. I'm not sure why that's not indicated into this movie a little bit better.
They mentioned Eisenhower, didn't they?
If they mentioned Eisenhower, then we're talking about
like
possibly
the mid-50s.
59. Well, Crocker, if we're talking 72 is the movie, this is 70, 71. If Jarman's a 3-term, that's 12 years. They did mention Eisenhower. So you're talking pre-60. You're talking late 50s when Crocker Jarman started.
Even if you want to take it back a little bit further, he could have. There could be possible ties around the Truman presidency, then into Ike, and then he would have been termed out.
Yeah.
Because it seems like he's been out of the game for a little while. But
He's an older guy. He's retired.
Yeah.
Right, and it would have been interesting to know just and I'm not saying I want a big backstory, but it'd been interesting to know what his political affiliation, how long ago was he defeated, or did he retire?
No,
Those type of things would have been interesting.
I got an inclination
I don't think he's defeated.
that he was defeated.
I think he did his
because they
terms
talk about
and he
him
was
winning
gone.
all the time.
I don't get the same vibe about his dad that you do, Ted. I'm not saying he's a good guy, because I don't know his politics. I don't know what he did. He was a popular governor, is what we understand. He probably did some good things for the state, but he probably did some bad stuff as well. We don't know really. All we know is his son wants to do this on his own merit for whatever reason. We could say it's because he doesn't agree with his dad's politics, and I think we would be right by saying that.
He doesn't want to ride his father's coattails. I don't think he had any aspirations or goals to even get into politics. As noted in the first conversation when they met, he and his staff, politics is bullshit. I think he was happy just being an attorney, being where he was,
right,
nice and casual.
Because his staff is on the ground,
his
and
staff
they realize
is
that
right. But
the politics
when someone
is
comes
not
to you
changing.
with the DNC, and how would you like to be our candidate for a U.S. Senate seat? That's tough to walk away from.
Yeah, but at the same time,
yeah,
and this is what I'm saying about the manipulation that we get from Peter Boyle's character, Marvin Lucas. He goes in there and he's like, "What have you done? Oh, you saved a tree?" And he's like, "Yeah, what's wrong with that? I'm kind of proud of those things." And he's like, "But you could be proud so much more." Because all he cares about is getting his candidate, getting paid for his candidate, holding on to that candidate as long as he can. He just jumped ship from the last person.
After he lost, right?
After he lost. I'm going to call him a piranha. He just is moving on to the next thing. So after he gets him elected, maybe he goes on and moves on to another guy.
That's exactly what he does. He's gone. He's done.
Right,
I think the opposite of you. I don't think Marvin's character is scummy at all. I think he's probably the most honest person of the bunch. You know what you get when you get a character. No.
Here's the thing.
You know what you get when you get a character like him.
Oh, he knows he's going to get. He's going to lose.
Right.
We don't get any postscript about what happens here. I can give you a pretty logical, based off of history and how history works. His victory in being a senator was as unlikely a win as Kennedy's victory was in 1956.
Oh, they're going to take him out. He's going to be assassinated.
No, they're going to. He did say a few things that were interesting, but he never went full bore. But no, I think that Kennedy's win in 56, even though it was predicted by some, it came kind of out of nowhere.
Are you talking about the election, the presidency?
Mm-hmm. No, 56 was when he ran for Senate and kind of won for Senate.
I thought you were talking about the presidency.
I think Bill McKay is very similar. When Kennedy won in 56, it was an open seat. The senator retired. But what do Americans love? They love an upset. They love an underdog. Upset story. This whole crew that you saw running around Bill McKay, all of them they're made men and women now. They're going to get him, and you're going to have a President McKay.
Unknown state congressional candidate Barack Obama, then becoming a U.S. senator.
That's another.
A junior senator, mind you, and then going to the presidency.
Well, Kennedy was a junior senator as well.
Exactly.
That's why those connections were made.
It's a very good analogy, which makes a lot more sense for the last words of the movie. Now what?
What's next?
What's next?
And
it leaves it so open.
This is why I say that this isn't satire. The last sentence of the movie means a lot because that is the idea and the mentality of everybody who then gets elected. If you talk to freshman senators and you listen to them speak, what they're so shocked about is the moment they get to Washington, that they get no time and they start their
It's
re-election.
like a college fraternity. They're hazed. They're hazed by the other senators.
they immediately start re-election. That's one of the first things that they do.
What is a politician's job? To get reelected.
Exactly. And that's such a prescient thing that Robert Redford says. And ultimately, I think he knows what they're going to do next. It's going to be either re-election or they're going to make a push for the presidency.
I disagree. I don't think he does know what's next. I don't
think he does either. I think he has to rely on his staff 100% because he honestly doesn't know the next move.
You guys think that he's naive. I don't think he's naive at all. I think once he gets into the game, it's like riding a bike. He watched his dad go through this. He had put it out of his mind that he wasn't going to play the game. And
then he got the fever.
I think Peter Boyle knew what was going to happen at the end of the debate.
Because he knew he was going to go rogue?
Well, he said, watch this, and so I wonder what that meant.
I don't know if the two of them planned it, but the reason he won that debate and why his dad all of a sudden is now his biggest supporter is because he made Crocker Jarman break. He broke Crocker Jarman's facade, and the real Crocker Jarman came out at the end of the debate.
Totally
where
lost
just came unhinged.
Yes.
And started yelling at him and all of this and making accusations. And to use an old pinball term, he put him on tilt. He knew what he was going to say would crack that facade that Crocker Jarman had so carefully put together. I think it was calculating. I don't think that it was frustration on Bill McKay's part at all that caused the end of that. At the end of it, he relished the idea of cracking Jarman right there.
No, I totally disagree with you on that one. We see the note that's passed over to Jarman. It's a speech at the end to wrap everything up. I think McKay sees that and says to himself, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy that reads off of
teleprompter
written speech for him. Because we see that earlier on in the movie when he walks in for the benefit for him to run for Senate. He's got his own note. But now we're at the stage where we don't want you to read your own notes. We want everything to be written for you. So I think he goes off script because that's his personality. I don't think he's calculating anything, to be perfectly honest with you. And I think at the end of this movie, when he says, what's next? He's worried. He's searching out Peter Boyle's character. He's desperate to talk to him because I don't think he really wanted to win. At the beginning of the movie, when we see that other candidate, he's sitting there with the kids, and the kids have all this blank stare on their faces.
Yeah.
And he's walking away in defeat. He looks like a man who sold his values to lose an election. And there was part of me that wanted for McKay to go through the same thing and lose the election and to had sell his soul to the devil and still not get elected.
It reminded me of a Mitt Romney moment with all the family around him.
Yes.
When I saw that, I'm like, that reminds me of Mitt Romney.
The candidate who didn't really want to win, that's awful reminiscent of what was very much rumored about what happened not so long ago in our history.
I would have just liked to have seen this gone full circle. We see at the beginning of the movie how one candidate lost. I just think it would have been better to have him lose because of the fact that he came so close, it was too big of a mountain to climb. And we don't know if this affair was a one and done. Maybe she just kept on at it and he finally just caved in.
She really wanted that interview.
Well, we don't even know if she was actually a reporter or what. I understand what you're saying, Ted, and I think that would be great if those things were true about the character, that at the end he's the master manipulator, that he actually knew all along what he was doing, and he basically wins because it was all in his plan. But I think at the end of the day, Peter Boyle's character is the guy who makes this all happen. I think that's very true in a lot of elections, is your campaign manager is the one that's making the right moves to put you into the right situations.
The candidate a lot of times is a puppet.
That was always said about James Carville and George Stephanopoulos with Bill Clinton.
Man, James Carville is creepy.
James Carville's awesome.
The Raging Cajun? That guy.
The Raging Cajun,
baby. Creepy.
He looks creepy now.
He looks like Skeletor.
Yeah, he does a little bit. But I know, Eric, that you're the question master. But I do want to posit one question here.
Is it about Natalie Wood?
This is...
Hubba.
Yeah, she is beautiful. My question is, this movie is billed as political satire. And then we had a couple of our critics comment about how funny it was. I didn't find anything funny.
I liked Jonathan Yardley's of the Washington Post. Powerful, authentic stuff. Yeah.
I thought that was a more
but
accurate...
it's not funny.
No.
How's it billed as a satire?
that is what everything that I read about the movie says, that it's a satire and it's supposed to be comedic. And maybe, Ken, you made the comment at the end of the last segment about how we saw things differently. Maybe I am too cynical. Maybe that's the problem. When it comes to political movies and things of that nature, maybe I do have more of a cynical view, and that's why I didn't really find anything really amusing or funny. And that's why I kind
there
of
is nothing amusing.
Nothing.
The
led
only
to the
thing
darker
amusing
side.
is some of the smart-ass comments of Bill McKay. Other than that, this is a
Oh,
drama through and through.
He knows that he's making this speech to the white people. That's why he says
Right.
white
Yes.
honkies.
White
You know,
honkies,
why
yeah.
he's laughing at the television studio, because he knows this is become a joke to him. So that's when I think it becomes amusing, is when we see it amusing to the character. But up until then, I could care less about McKay.
I fully own the fact that when it comes to politics and political movies and things, I am cynical of how I personally come to politics in general. I have a very cynical mind.
We've never had those conversations, Ted. I don't know what
Right,
you're
I
talking
know,
about.
right?
I don't know.
Reading the stuff about the movie and how it was billed, it just struck me, and I didn't know if it was just me that
No,
was like,
maybe
I
that
don't
was
see
it
this at all.
initially as it was perceived when it was being conceived and written, but I can't see how anyone would consider this a satire or any type of comedic look. If anything, I would consider this more of a documentarial style of how politics in
Kind
the
of.
early 70s was actually played out. And one of the things I do
Yeah,
want to
'cause-
talk about is how politics of the early 70s kind of relates to the politics of today. I mean, granted, the technology is far and vast superior, but the dirty tricks, the games, the issues
Well, and
of the day in
the issues,
72
yeah.
are practically the same issues of today.
Well, yeah, Michael Ritchie, who was the director, he was actually working on campaigns before this movie, and that's why Robert Redford wanted him to be the director in the
Right.
first place. If we want to talk about satire and funny things, this director is known later on for his comedies, like Fletch. But he spent a lot of time on the campaign trail, so he knew some of these tricks that you're talking about, Eric. He knew what the political agendas were of the day. He had a good idea of what to bring to this movie. I'm not sure if he totally brought it. I don't know if that's because of Redford or not. As much as I like Redford as an actor, he's very dull and boring in this movie. And if he had some of the charisma that he has in movies like The Sting, even All the President's Men, which we just did, he shows more energy in those movies than in this movie, and I think it drags it down a little bit. So I don't know if it's the writing, if it's the acting, or if it's the directing, because I think you have all the elements here for a really strong political movie, and I think it kind of just misses.
If you give Redford more charisma early on and you give him more charisma halfway during the movie, it takes away from the plot, if you will. You have a character who is an underdog, an unknown in the political realm. You just know the name McKay, but he has no prior political office. If he's coming in there as, personable, everyone loves him, he can't do anything wrong, everything he says is gold, he's going to take out Crocker Jarman in a heartbeat. But I think you have to have an individual who is somewhat cardboard in mannerisms, someone who doesn't realize that, hey, you have to shake hands and kiss babies, and you have to do all of this. You have to smile, and you have to wave, and you have to do everything that a political candidate does. He doesn't know that. The character that he's playing is the character that he is as an attorney, not as a candidate. And he eventually evolves into that candidate. And I thought during the debate, he had a lot of charisma.
They almost played it as a John Kennedy, Richard Nixon type of a thing.
A little bit.
The whole
Little
debate
bit.
thing. What I want to say here, and what you had mentioned, the issues. I think looking back at this with 2020 eyes, or 2022 eyes, it should be shocking for anybody. Another person who's taken a modern day movie and really put a mirror back up to the past that we've not come as far as what we think we have is Spike Lee in BlacKkKlansman. we're dealing with the same issues.
This movie is filmed
brings-
1 year for Roe v. Wade. So abortion is
so-
still a hot topic in 72.
Yeah, and now it's
An even a hotter topic.
they put a rocket ship to the back of that issue again.
I mean, the only
but,
thing that is not the same is busing, but there's a different name for busing now.
Now it's called
It's-
inclusion.
It's a different name, but
so-
it's the same thing.
It's exactly the same thing. I know that because my wife's a teacher. But
And a
there's
damn
a lot
good
of
teacher at that.
there's a lot of these issues. Looking back at this movie from 2022, that's the damning thing for me in this whole movie. That Crocker Jarman's and Bill McKay's of the world are the reason why we've not made nearly the amount of progress that we could have as a country to address some of the issues, legitimate issues that Bill McKay does bring up, but then abandons. If there's one thing that I would want anybody to take from this movie, and it's something that I've been preaching ever since I studied history in college, when Bill McKay talks about that they're doing everything to keep us separated. It's rich versus poor. It's the not quite as poor versus the less poor, even poorer. It's blacks versus whites. It's keeping anything to keep us separated, because the moment they know that we are together, that's when things are going to change. A lot of these guys that are in politics, like Crocker Jarman, they make their money making sure things never change. That's one of the things that I took from this movie. I fully embrace the fact and know myself enough to know that I'm cynical and to know that I come at this from a very negative point of view. But that's one of the major things that I took from this movie. In my opinion, it's sad because it really shows that we're still fighting the same battles.
There has to be a better way, Ted.
50 years later now,
72, man. 50
we're still
years.
fighting the same battles. We still have rampant poverty and homelessness.
It's been much longer than that, but
Right,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
no, it has, but
Definitely.
based on the movie,
But
I know.
as far as this movie goes, we're still having these same discussions.
and
it's-
just look at it from California political point of view. California has rampant homelessness in the cities. Poverty is out of control in California just
Right.
because of the property values, the haves and the have-nots. How about the fire in Malibu?
Silicon
right?
Valley. Yeah.
Yeah, you got all the
Oh,
fires
that was
in
another
California.
thing too.
Yeah.
I
I mean, granted, it was Malibu, but still, it was a fire.
Still, it's fire. So the whole idea of fire season, I
Right.
guess, was still
the
was
watershed.
a thing even back
the
in the
watershed
70s.
was huge.
Right.
And
now
that was
it's-
one of his
and now it's
political
a
things.
crisis. So
It's crazy.
And we still haven't figured out how to have cheap desalination for water. One of the things that would solve a lot of our problems. I could talk about this for hours, and it's
What do
a
you
different
think, Ken?
podcast.
As far as going back to the movie goes, I'm kind of curious about his old staff when he was a lawyer, because we get
They
to
hate
see
him.
a couple of those come and visit him and kind of give the stink eye
A little bit, yeah.
a little
Yeah.
bit. Maybe because he is a politician now, and now they're rejecting him, but we really don't know. Like one of his staff from when he was a lawyer giving a look to one of his other guys that was on his staff as a lawyer and now on the staff when he's running for Senate, and he gives him a mean looking look in the
That traitor.
Yep.
But why does he come
Sold
down
out.
there to shake his hand?
Loyalty to somebody who was a friend at one time.
Yeah, but then give the stank eye to the other guy who's supporting his candidacy. It was just kind of off. I would have liked to know a little bit more. If you're going to use that, I would like to know a little bit more. Earlier in the movie, he said, it was the line that Eric used, politics is BS. Maybe that's why he's coming down to shake his hand, but then to also let somebody else
he
know.
poses it initially as a question. This thing you call politics. Politics is bullshit.
Right.
And then Marvin goes, "Oh, is that the answer? Oh, great. There's your sarcasm."
I would have just taken it out of the movie. Him coming down and visiting him, for me, it just didn't play out the way I wanted it to, or play out in any type of way. But it's an interesting look, at least, of somebody going from no chance to winning the election. There are decent steps to show that.
Well, one of the steps is the evolution of it is the star power. You didn't have to bring Natalie Wood in. Now
They did.
you have an, well, I'm glad they did, but you have an endorsement now. McKay has an endorsement from Natalie
she
Wood
even
as
kinda-
herself.
Yeah, she kind of even hit on Robert.
A
Redford.
little.
Yeah, it seemed like that, right?
Because
Yeah,
everyone was
a little
trying to
bit.
talk to her, and she's like, "I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to
Yeah.
McKay."
Exactly.
That's feeding his ego a little bit too.
Oh my
I
God,
mean, it's
should've-
ramping up.
Maybe he should have cheated with her instead of the lady in the
Well, that
glasses
would've-
that we know nothing about, right?
Yeah.
But Natalie Wood was actually retired at that time.
She was.
And he asked her as a favor to come on there. And, of course, they were really strong friends. I did not know
Yeah.
that about them until I did the
It's too
research
bad
for
she
this movie.
didn't hang around him more.
And then Robert
instead of
Wagner
her
killed her.
instead of her
Oops, did I say that?
her murderer.
Well,
Oh no, he murdered her.
That
He
is a
and-
whole
That's
nother
a whole
podcast.
different podcast.
Oh,
yeah.
and they're out there. Well, guys, we've had some great debate on this movie. I mean, there's a lot of different agendas, a lot of different opinions, a lot of different point of views that we've all brought up. And I think it's kind of opened our eyes to, at least for me, certain aspects of the movie. I did not look at it from that direction. And as I'm looking at it from, say, Ted's point of view or Ken's point of view or my point of view, there are definitely different opinions, and there are different ways that we can dissect and analyze this movie and analyze the character of Bill McKay. So I think we've done a great job with that. I've really enjoyed it. So let's move on to our final thoughts. We will kick it off with Ken.
I like this movie. I'm just not sure how much I like this movie. I understand Eric's argument about why McKay is not a likable person at first. But in my opinion, this is a movie. You need to have a likable character to latch onto. And there's really not a lot of them here. Maybe that makes the movie more real. But I think if you're going to have a political candidate, he should have some type of charisma to even get into the race. And I like his character towards the end when he's realizing that he has sold his soul to the devil and that he's just tired of the same old, saying the same old stuff to everybody, giving out the same line instead of what he really wants to say. But I really would love to have seen more of that at the beginning, more passion for the values that he holds dearly. The scenes with his wife, even the scene where they make out and I guess have sex before they go to the convention that they were going to, it's stale. There's just nothing there. And I feel some of these things are a little bit forced. But I do like it. I'm not sure, though, if I'll ever see it again. I don't know if I'll have a desire to see it again. I gave the previous movie that we reviewed, All the President's Men, a B. And I want to give this movie a B-, but I feel like it's kind of 2 steps down from All the President's Men. Based on that and based on the grade that I gave before, I'm going to give this a C+. You can argue me, and I could bump it up to a B-, but I think a C+ is where it's at. If you ever want to see a movie on the process that someone has to go to get elected, this is a very good movie to do that. If you want to see a movie that you can rewatch over and over again, this is not that movie. That's where we're going to end it with a C+.
All right. Well, I'm very confident with your C+ rating that you are not using my DVD as a coaster. So that makes me feel better right there. And you're absolutely right. This is not a comparison to All the President's Men. All the President's Men is a far superior movie. It's pretty hard to put any movie into that realm or that category, in my opinion. But let it be said that I am a sucker for political movies, political satire, political dramas, whatever we want to call it. I am a sucker for them. And this is a movie that is a favorite of mine. It's not the greatest movie of all time, but as Ken said, I think if you're looking for a movie that kind of breaks down the political process of a candidate, especially of a candidate of that era, I think this is a extremely good movie. I think the cast is great. I think the movie is well done. And there's a few things. There's obviously some flaws in it. I'll play the Ken card on this review. I would have liked a little bit more backstory on a few of the characters. I think we could have dragged the movie out a little bit longer, or maybe cut some scenes and add a little bit more. I would have liked to know a little bit more about his father, maybe a little bit more about the candidate himself, Bill McKay, a little bit of his history that led up to where he is. I think that would have helped kind of set the plot more for this movie. But overall, this is a movie I've owned for many years. I think it's one, if you are into politics, if you are into Robert Redford, good acting, if you will, I think this is a movie that you should watch, and I think you will enjoy it. This movie is a favorite of mine. I will watch it again. I probably watch it once every couple years. It's not to the caliber of All the President's Men, but it does stand well on its own merit. I was kind of debating this grade a little bit myself, teetering a little bit on that C+, B-, but as we've talked about this movie more, I'm definitely going with a B-. Ted, take us home. What are your thoughts?
I agree with a lot of what both of you said. I'm going to say here that I think my opinion might be a little bit harsher. I think the writing here is thin. Eric, you pointed out a good point where there needed to be a little bit more to the characters. I think the characters aren't left with a whole lot of meat on their bones. We are left with a lot of speculation, and that's not always a good place to be, especially with a movie like this, where you really needed a more character-driven script. So that leaves me kind of wanting for more. That's the whole thing with this movie. When, Eric, you had chosen this movie, anything with Redford, I'm always excited and I'm game for it, especially if it's a Redford movie that I hadn't seen. Because I legitimately like Robert Redford. I think Robert Redford could have been a real-life politician. Definitely been a politician in the vein of a Clint Eastwood or even a Ronald Reagan. He's extremely charismatic. It just doesn't come out here. And here again, we debated whether or not that the character should have had that. I don't think that this plays to his strengths. The part of me that does really like this movie is that it does shine a light in modern day on the fact that we're still dealing with issues that were being battled about back in the 1970s before all three of us were born. That we're still fighting these battles, and it's maddening. And I think that's what it is. It's kind of a magnifying glass for the fact that this is the machine. However, I think there are movies that do it better. I think a movie like Wag the Dog does it with a more satirical
Oh,
and
come
funny
on.
type of
Wag the
type
dog?
of way. Yep.
Whatever.
And,
okay, no. I don't drink that Kool-Aid. No.
So I'm left with a C.
So it's an average movie for you.
It's a perfectly average movie. There's something that can be taken away from the movie for everybody. If you haven't seen it, you should probably check it out, especially if you like political movies, because there are parts of it that are really interesting. I think we highlighted some of those. Peter Boyle's awesome. I love Peter Boyle, partially because Peter Boyle was best friends with John Lennon, and I love John Lennon. So there's that.
And he was the monster in Young Frankenstein.
Yes,
Yeah.
he was. It's Frankenstein.
2 years earlier, right? All right. Well, great. We all agree it's a halfway decent movie. And Ted, you definitely hit it there. If you haven't seen the movie, watch it. We would love to hear what you have to say on Twitter and Facebook. Tell us your thoughts on the movie. Are we full of it? Are we hitting the nail on the head? We'd love to hear your comments on this movie. The
Are we
Candidate.
going to replace Ted with a monkey?
With a chimp?
Thanks for that
Are we going to
answer.
replace him with Bubbles the chimp? Yeah.
Please don't.
So we're going to be switching gears for our next one, which is kind of interesting turn. We're going David Fincher country, going with his 1995 release Seven. Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt, Kevin Spacey. It's a interesting movie. And I'm looking.
Shh. We're not supposed to know Kevin Spacey's in the movie.
Oh, come on. All right. Yeah. He's been written off the face of the
Spoiler
earth.
alert.
What is it,
Spoiler
like
alert.
25 years later? and
Come
we
on. Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Jeez.
Guess
Yeah.
what? The Titanic sank. I guess that would
what?
ruin that
No, it didn't.
Titanic movie for you, too.
What? Man.
Holy crap, man. Just
Kennedy died?
wrap
What
this
the
up.
hell?
Just giving away the ends of all the movies.
Yeah. So we look forward to glancing our eyes on that one. Ted, where can they find us on Twitter?
Well, we can be found on Twitter at hookedon_movies. On Twitter, we just recently got our 1,000th follower on Twitter. In honor
1,000.
of our 1,000th follower, I told them that they would get a shout out on our podcast, and our 1,000th follower was the Rich and Jimmy Watch a Film podcast, and they can be found at their Twitter handle at Rich and Jimmy. So
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you to them, and
Yeah.
thank you to
Hoo-ah.
everybody who's followed us on Twitter and interact with us all you can. And it's generally a good time. You're generally going to be interacting with me. So if you think that I have a relatively decent sense of humor, hit me up, and I'll be more than happy to chat with you.
Maybe
And of
we'll give
course,
something nice out for 2,000, right?
ooh, maybe.
Ooh.
You
Maybe
never
one of
know.
these days, if I ever jump on Twitter, you could chat with me or
Nope.
chat with Eric.
I'm
Nope,
not
you're
on
not allowed
Twitter,
on
so that's
Twitter.
going to be a real miracle.
You're not
in
allowed on
itself.
Twitter.
Maybe we'll give out for our 2,000th, we'll give like a Hooked on Movies t-shirt.
Can I still do MySpace?
Ooh, that'd be
Can
cool.
I still do
No.
a MySpace
Oh,
page?
yeah, you can. Yeah,
Absolutely.
just make
Okay.
sure I'm in your top 5 friends.
Yeah.
Is that even
Yeah.
a thing anymore, MySpace?
No, it's not. It
No,
is
I didn't
not.
it's
think
not.
so.
But it's a great
That's
reference.
why you can do it.
And we
That's why I can
appreciate
do it.
it.
But
well,
you are playing around on Facebook, though, aren't you?
which
Ken?
is
Yeah,
also
so-
an antiquated, from what I understand, by the kids. But tell us
Oh.
about it anyway.
But you could definitely check us out on Facebook, Hooked on Movies. We discuss movies in general. What we normally do now is whenever one of our podcast movies is coming up for the week, we usually throw some interesting facts about those movies and discussions about those movies. But it's not limited to that. So if you ever just want to jump in and share something about a movie that maybe nobody knows or something that everybody knows, but you just want to share because you're very excited about it, feel free. We love to talk about it. We love to comment about it. So join us. It's a great time for all.
If you're lonely and you want to talk, Ken will meet you at the coffee house.
Yeah, he will. And make sure you catch us on whatever platform you listen to us on, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, Anchor. We're listed on all of those. And if you can, give us a rating and review, because that helps us get seen by more and more people. And it just gets our name out there.
And if you're ever in a bathroom stall, you could just, it's, Hooked on Movies, and people will be like, what's
I don't know if
Movies?
I want to be there.
Well, Ken, that's what Twitter is. That's what Twitter is now.
Twitter is now a bathroom stall.
Pretty
Snapchat
much.
us, everybody. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. And as always, I'm not wearing any pants. Film at 11.
Oh, see you at the movies.
See you next time at Hooked on Movies.